We'll just give it 1 or 2 minutes for people to join in since the link has just gone out. Excited to see some familiar names. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll give it just 1 more minute and then we'll start. Thank you for bearing with us as we navigated the technical error on the back end. Awesome. So, in the interest of time, we are going to get started, and hopefully, people will continue rolling in as we chat today. So hi and welcome to everyone. It's nice to see some familiar names in the Zoom meeting chat. I will be kicking us off, and we'll let people roll in. Please do grab yourself a drink and make yourself comfortable. We will surely be sharing a lot of information with you today. So today we are kicking off the community of practice on innovative financing at GSF. This community of practice has emerged out of a recognized need from within our community. Priyanka, can I ask you to move on to the next slide? So in our 2025 member survey, we had 66% participants identifying funding as their biggest challenge. And with exacerbated funding cuts, reconfiguration of existing funds, and shorter grant cycles, education organizations are definitely being pushed to look into more efficient capital sourcing. As part of this community of practice that we are launching today, you can expect an open space to practitioners and participants to share what works, what doesn't, and what do we need to do collectively to crowd in and be ready for alternate financing mechanisms. This COP series will be featuring several models that have been implemented either directly by GSF and its partners, like the one that we are going to be discussing today on the Incentives for Learning program in Kenya, and others that are emerging as agile and innovative ways, garnering interest within the education sector, such as smart subsidies, outcome funds, and so on and so forth. Let's move ahead. So, today we are going to be kicking off the series with a deep dive into the first innovative financing model that GSF and the IDP Foundation have been implementing together with partners in Kenya. In terms of the problem framing, we know that while enrollment in low fee private schools has been growing rapidly in developing countries, learning improvement hasn't been catching up a similar pace. And these low fee private schools often are operating as small businesses, with owners prioritizing investment in assets that drive enrollment, such as buildings and infrastructure. And there is limited incentive and funds left by school owners to be allocated towards driving learning outcome improvement specifically. On the other hand, we see from IDP Foundation's school loans portfolio that the repayment rate for schools who've accessed debt is 96%, and that demonstrates that school financing is a viable segment. So, just positioning the current market gap and the segment's viability, probed us to conceptualize the Incentives for Learning program in Kenya that attaches a financial incentive for school owners to make learning a business priority. Let's move on. So, in terms for the plan for the next 90 minutes, I know we are running far behind. We'll try to make up for the lost time. But just in terms of the plan for how we're going to be spending the next few minutes together, we'll kick off with an introduction to the IfL program. And by IfL, I'm going to be referring to the Incentives for Learning program. I'll be highlighting the theory of change, the key stakeholders, as well as the program assumptions. Then we will dive deeper into the model design and the journey for IfL loans. We will then be breaking out for about 15 minutes into groups to get the conversation started around innovative and alternative financing models that you may have engaged with at your end or you may be interested in, and the challenges that you've faced. This will also be a great opportunity for us to hear what you are interested to discuss and learn about to plan our upcoming COP sessions on innovative financing. We will then be coming back to chat about the implementation and operational realities of the IfL model and how we've been managing these so far. Finally, we'll hopefully park some time for a question and answers round at the end of the session. Great. So moving ahead, today you will be hearing from these three people. Some of you might already know me. My name is Purnima, and I work as Senior Manager at the Global Schools Forum. I have been leading on the design and implementation of the Incentives for Learning program ever since conceptualization, which was back in 2023. Believe us. I am joined by Raphael, who we call Ralph from the IDP Foundation. He serves as Head of Education, Finance, and Quality and has been leading us on designing the IfL loan product, as well as feeding insights from his experience with financial institutions. He has also been a part of the design and implementation right from the beginning. And finally, we have Sammy from GSF again, who is an innovation manager. Sammy keeps the operational wheels of the program turning on the ground in Kenya, and he's in charge of documenting all the ongoing learnings for wider replication scale. I know, and I'm not sure if Rob has already joined us in the waiting room, but you'll also be hearing from Rob, who is founder and CEO of the Jackfruit Network and has been instrumental in taking the program to the ground in Kenya. You'll be hearing from him about implementation realities, as well as having the chance to meet him in one of the breakout groups to talk about how the program has been going from his perspective. And with that, let's jump straight into the first part, an overview of the IfL model. But before we move ahead, a quick heads up, please feel free to use the chat box to share any reflections or ongoing questions as we are going through the slides. We will be picking up a few of these for discussion in the last 10 minutes or else responding to you in the chat box itself. I'm going to kick us off by talking about what is IfL, a question that is posed to us more often than we like. But simply put, IfL is a loan to schools with a discount for learning. IfL is not a new loan product, but it's an enhancement to traditional working capital and infrastructure loans that schools take out on an ongoing basis from local financial institutions. When the children's literacy and numeracy improves in the school owner receives a discount on the interest for their loan. Now, the core hypothesis for the IfL model is that when learning becomes a business priority for school owners, behavior shifts and trickles down right from the level of the school owner to the school leader and the teachers in the classroom. School leaders and teachers are then motivated to adopt low to no cost interventions targeting learning outcome improvements. A quick disclaimer, the IfL program is purely based on a financial incentive, and the program aims to establish the impact of this intervention as a siloed intervention. So just the impact of the financial incentive on improving learning outcomes. This is why through this program, we are not recommending or providing any additional education-focused capacity building or external interventions to school. The understanding is that with an adequate financial incentive, plus access to data and an understanding of the gaps in schools' performances, school leaders will be best placed to identify and adopt interventions that ultimately improve learning in the classroom. Let's move on. Okay, so I mentioned that IfL has been in conceptualization since 2023, but 2025 is the year we formally launched with a 2-year pilot. This pilot period is aimed at establishing the impact of financial incentives to schools alone as a lever for learning outcome improvement. Our study includes 400 schools who are assigned into treatment and control groups, and to rigorously assess whether the financial incentive program can improve learning outcomes, we are running a randomized control trial comparing the impact of incentivized loans to treatment schools against those that receive standard loans, so the control schools. This will allow us to isolate the effect of the financial incentive itself and generate evidence around that is credible and actionable for funders and financial institutions, as well as policymakers who are considering whether this model is worth scaling. There are 4 key guiding questions for our pilot. The first one, as I have mentioned before, is whether financial incentives without any additional intervention can improve learning outcomes in low-fee private schools. The second primary question is, what does behavior change actually look like at the school level when financial incentives are introduced? And how quickly do these translate into measurable student learning gains? As part of this study, we are also establishing the most scalable and contextualized way to measure learning in low resource settings. And this is something that's going to be a contribution to the wider ecosystem of FLN assessments as well. And the final question that we are tracking is, what drives genuine demand and makes this model stick in the long run? At the end of the 2 years, we will have reached up to 150 schools, impacting around 40,000 children through impact-linked loans aimed at improving learning outcomes. And we'll also be generating robust and locally grounded evidence to inform practice and policy decisions around innovative debt financing. Let's move on. In terms of the program cycle itself, we start with treatment schools taking up IfL loans. The linked incentive nudges them to invest into areas that will improve learning outcomes. Some examples of low to no cost interventions are investing in procuring the right kind of teaching learning materials, upskilling teachers, tracking attendance, using assessment data for remediation, improving teacher accountability, and investing into inclusive practices. Schools are then assessed at pre-decided intervals. For the pilot period, we are assessing random samples of students in grades 1 to 3 on literacy and numeracy outcomes to determine the school's performance. The assessment data unlocks a reward based on the performance of the school. And our hypothesis is that improved learning and external validation of the school drives up enrollment, leading to a higher capital and debt need, which in turn drives up financial institutions' loan portfolios as well. There are 5 key assumptions underpinning this model that are being validated through the pilot period. We will be discussing some of these in greater detail in the next section, but as a quick summary, the first is that every treatment school who wants an IfL loan needs to pay a commitment fee. This helps us understand genuine demand for the program, and in the long run, it also covers operational costs for the financial institutions. The economics are worked out in a way that makes it viable for schools to pay this contribution fee, yet benefit from the reward if they qualify. We need to understand the willingness for schools to pay this fee. The second assumption is that we are validating the tiered interest reward framework that we've set up to understand if this is motivating enough for schools to sign up for the incentives for learning loan. Third is that every school, whether treatment or control, receives an assessment results and a report card. And they also are pointed towards a curated resource hub, as well as a peer learning community that helps schools identify and adopt low to no cost interventions that help improve learning. We are validating the value of this in addition to the financial incentive through the pilot period. The fourth assumption is around improving learning outcomes, driving up enrollment. So the assumption is that when there is an external validation for a school that tells parents and communities around them that this school is performing well in terms of learning outcomes for students, it'll also help them drive up enrollment. And that will lead to a growing need for additional capital from financial institutions. The fifth and final key assumption is that we will be able to drive organic demand for IfL from schools, lowering the marketing and operational costs and improving profitability for financial institutions through a growing loans portfolio. We have positive early evidence for many of these assumptions, but are still validating program impact and commercial viability. Let's go on. A quick snapshot of our implementing partners. We have Waterloo Foundation and Michael and Suzanne Dell Foundation as anchor funders, as well as strategic advisors to this program. GSF and IDP Foundation are co-leading on the program design, implementation, sustainability, as well as scale up. IDP Foundation are also covering the reward payout for the pilot period. Our two implementing partners are the financial institutions who are making this all happen on the ground. And these are Jackfruit Finance as well as Premier Credit. They are the ones interacting with the schools to market and disperse IfL loans, as well as to reward them based on assessment results. And finally, we have ID Insight, who is the independent assessment and evaluation partner. So, a quick snapshot of a market insight study that we did right at the start of the implementation period in early 2025 with key stakeholders who are crucial for this program to work on the ground. Through this market study, we identified motivations, barriers, and incentives to participate. I'm not going to go through all of these bullets, but in summary, school proprietors were initially concerned about paying an additional fee and being externally assessed, but they were motivated by the opportunity to be benchmarked against their peers, differentiate themselves in a crowded market, and access tangible rewards, making transparent assessment and clear reward structures critical to secure their buy-in. Loan officers were hesitant to introduce an unfamiliar product that could strain their client relationships, but were motivated by the chance to deepen engagement with schools, which required strong training, clear messaging, and practical tools to support marketing to schools. Financial institutions faced challenges translating the program design into field execution, but saw value in growing their loan portfolio, strengthening their client loyalty, and differentiating themselves in the market as well, making operational readiness and capacity building in the back end very, very critical. For enumerators, as well as our research partner, they needed to navigate a lot of sensitivity around fairness, comparison, and expectations among schools, which required careful engagement and communication throughout the assessment process. And finally, parents were skeptical of child assessments and concerned about privacy, but they were motivated by the prospect of understanding and improving their child's learning, making simple consent processes and alignment with trusted local education frameworks and government departments particularly important. Now, the success of this model depended not only on the financial incentive, but on understanding the motivations and concerns of every stakeholder and designing the program to align them around improved learning outcomes. Let's move on. To conclude this section and to hand it over, the design of the IfL program has been very, very bottom up, aligning with the realities of the different stakeholders that we spoke about earlier. We started out with a design workshop in 2023, continued it in 2024, and brought together research organizations, equality partners, and financial institutions in Kenya that led to the design of a program blueprint and an operational roadmap. In the first year of implementation in 2025, we conducted the market insight study that I spoke about with a firm called Well-Made Strategy, and we aligned the program design and value proposition with real feedback from loan officers and school proprietors in the field. And finally, Our entire assessment process, scoring methodology, and the tiered reward structure is based on a benchmarking study led by ID Insight with 97 low cost private schools in Kenya. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ralph, who's going to dive deeper into the loan model and walk us through the entire IfL loan lifecycle.
Okay. Thank you, Ponima. Just checking if I'm audible enough. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Thanks to the participants for making time to be here. Once again, let me also apologize for the technological hiccup. Technology has its own way of letting us know that it's not perfect. I'm going to try and run through my session very fast, just in the name of making time for Q&A. So apologies in advance if I move too fast. I think we'll make it up at the end of the session. So I'm going to run us through kind of the operational flow of implementing the model, whilst diving deep into some of the components around the model. So what you see on the screen here is the IfL is a loan product that is marketed to schools. You get the buy-in of the schools, and then this buy-in is through the schools committing 1% of their loan amount. The loan is disbursed by the financial institution, and then the repayment starts. So the loan relationship kind of, for a typical or for a traditional loan, this is actually where the loan relationship kind of ends. They market it, the school receives the loan, repayment happens. But what's unique about IfL is the journey keeps going on, and that is where we have a third-party evaluator that will come in, do an assessment of the students. Feedback is given to the school. We will touch deeply on all these kind of components in the next few slides. So the school gets the feedback. If the school qualifies for reward, the reward is disbursed to the school, and then they come back for another loan. The cycle kind of keeps going. Next slide. Okay, so before we dive deep into it, someone will probably ask which schools or what is the criteria for schools to be part of this. This IfL model actually sits in the financial institution. So it's basically a loan product that has incentives to it, as Ponima mentioned. So firstly, the school has to be able to qualify or meet all the financial institutions' requirement for taking a loan. So you have to be eligible loan client of the financial institution. And then for the purposes of the model, we have these criteria where the school has to be registered with the government, and also with the private school association. So in this case, we have the Kenyan Private School Association, and then we have the ABET that also kind of registers low-fee private schools. The school is a school that should also be using the national curriculum. This school should be charging between $30 and then $150 tuition fee, and this is per term. So approximately we have about 3,800 shillings to 19,500 shillings per term as tuition fee. They also need to be running from grade 1 to 6. The assessment actually kind of considered these grade levels. So we need a school that is having these grade levels. And then it should have basic school infrastructure. It should be, at least, it should be like a school setting where learning happens. And then the school should also have been operating for the past 3 years. So at least they would have gone through 3 academic cycle. The proprietor knows what it's about, and actually even know when it comes to school management as well as improving academics. We'll probably have some experience on how to go about it. Next slide. Now the product itself, as Ponima mentioned, the IfL loan product is the same as the financial institution's existing loan product. We only added 2 conditions to it. And those conditions are, we want the loan that is running from 6 months to 18 months. 6 months because It is relatively short, but long enough for a school proprietor to actually trigger any form of learning improvement. And then the 18 months is also not stretching the repayment too long for a school to wait too long to have a chance of actually getting a reward. This is because each loan has a one chance of getting a reward. So you don't want to have a loan stretching too long for a school to be waiting to get an opportunity for a reward. And then the other bit is the 1% client contribution that Ponima mentioned. This is a 1% of the approved loan amount. But for this 1% not to be a blocker or hindrance for schools joining, we've made it flexible for schools to make that payment. So we have an option for it to be deducted from the school saving account if the financial institution has a savings account or some form of an account for the schools. Or it can be capitalized onto the principal amount. So instead of paying from pocket, it is capitalized onto the principal. And then once repayment is being done, it's also paid through the repayment process. And then there is also the option of a cash payment upfront. If the school has cash and want to commit that, it's also allowed. So, like we mentioned, sorry, can you go back? Let me touch on the reward quickly. So the loan has these incentives attached to it, and it's a 4-tiered kind of incentive, with tier 1 being the entry tier, and then tier 4 being kind of the top tier. What this means is, if a school takes the loan and then they are assessed, after the assessment will be scoring between 100 and 0 and 100. If the school score between 65 to 79, they get a chance of qualifying to become a bronze rewarder. So what this means is, if you get a bronze reward, you are getting 35% discount on the total interest you'll be paying on that loan. And if you score between 80 to 84, then you qualify for a silver reward, which gets you 50% discount on your total interest on the loan. So we have the gold reward, which also gives you 75% discount. And then the top tier is the diamond, which can get you 100% of the total interest on the loan wiped off. And to get a diamond, you have to score between 95 to 100 score. Like I said, the reward is calculated on the total interest of the loan. So it's not on the principal, but then on the total interest that a school is supposed to pay on that loan. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is also the process flow, how to get schools on board. But before you start engaging schools, the financial institution need to have a system in place that is able to actually flag these loans as they come in. Remember that these schools have to pay a commitment fee of 1%. That payment of it demonstrate that, okay, this is a school that is really interested about this and wants to be part. So it is not all loans that will be sitting under IfL. So there should be a system that will be able to flag that, okay, this school proprietor has requested for an IfL, and then it can be tracked in the system. As the schools pay their client contribution, there should be a way of also tracking that at the back end of the FI. The system should be able to also track rewards as and when they come in. So after the assessment, information flows to the FIs, giving details of schools that are qualifying. So they should be able to track that. And then once you have that backend system in place, then you make sure loan officers, who are kind of the front leaders for this model, you get them ready. By getting them ready, they need resource materials, marketing deck that is easy enough to understand. And then you have to train them on how to communicate and explain this to the schools. Equally important for them to also be able to answer questions that these schools will have around the model. And then once this readiness is in place, marketing begins. Marketing IfL is a bit different from the regular marketing because it has all these complexities around it, the reward, the assessment. You need to get schools to understand. So we recommend an in-person kind of visit to the schools. To also get schools to really know that, okay, this is actually true and get their trust. We also recommend having a leadership, someone at the leadership level from the financial institution to accompany loan officers to also kind of firm up what loan officer will be marketing. And then you leave behind brochures and video explainers, any material that would be helpful for the school proprietor to understand. We recommend follow-up visit or calls to these school clients as well. In terms of the onboarding, once you do the marketing, school is interested, you secure their buy-in, you close the deal. The school signs a terms and condition form, and then they kind of commit their 1% or even give approval for financial institution to deduct that 1% from the account. The loan is disbursed, and then the school improvement works begins, where the school director goes back and starts working on improving learning outcomes. Next slide, please. So when it comes to the assessment bit, and this is also to say there's plan to have a full session that talks about the assessment. So I'll just touch briefly on it. The assessment will be looking at 3 areas. So literacy, which is reading, numeracy, and then teacher prediction. We have given equal weight for these components. So 1/3 of it, 1/3 of the score will be targeting the reading, 1/3 also for maths, and then teacher prediction 1/3. We are using self-administered EGRA, and then for schools that are coming in fresh, will be kind of scored against a benchmark from a study that we did sometime in 2005 last year. So for the first time coming in, they will be scored and they will be scored against these benchmark. But for subsequent loans, as they come back, they will be measured and scored against their growth. That is where they have been able to improve towards from their first assessment. There are some risks around the assessment, and we have plans in place and have strategies of dealing with those risks. So the questions are not shared with schools beforehand, and then the questions kind of refresh. We keep refreshing it so that there isn't any communication between schools or even sharing of questions. The student that will be assessed are randomly selected on the day of the assessment by the enumerators. And this selection is done from the register and not from students available that day. So we always encourage proprietors to desist from, actually preventing certain students to be selected for the assessment. And yeah, so just also saying that this information will also be made available for you. Next slide, please. Okay, so this deck actually gives us a snapshot of how the feedback report from the assessment looks like. So if you look at the left-hand side of the slide, you will see that is a kind of a snapshot of the report itself, where you have the overall score. So where you see the 61.94 is the overall score, cumulative score for the entire school. But then the report also gives a breakdown of the 3 strengths of the school, and then the 3 areas that the school needs to improve. The report itself also gives some benchmarking of the school to its peers, how they are doing in certain areas. It also shows the teacher prediction part of the assessment for the school owner to see how accurately or not that the teacher was able to predict the learner's ability. If you look at the right-hand side of the screen, that is a snapshot of the resource hub. So the report from the assessment has links that connects each school or the schools to resource hub. This resource hub is filled with 300 plus resources that can help a school improve learning. So once you are a school owner, you get your report and you are able to know the areas that you need more improvement. You can click on the link, it will take you to the resource hub, and then you can engage it to improve. Next slide. So we've been talking about reward a lot. This is how the reward looks like and how it's administered. Once the school receives the report from the assessors, so again, also to say that the assessment report or results goes from the assessor straight to the school and doesn't go through the financial institution. So once the school receives it, financial institutions confirm with the school. So it's more like a reach out to the school to confirm the overall score, and then the reward amount that is associated with that score. The financial institution plus the school owner agrees on how the reward will be administered. And then once that is agreed, the financial institution kind of executes it. There are two ways for the reward to be administered, and we have this as a decision for the school owner to decide how would you want the reward to be administered. The reward doesn't go in a form of cash. It goes to help the school owner kind of repay the loan, either their current loan or the future loan that they will be taking. So the two options is it can be applied as a reduction that's spread across the remainder of their installments. So whatever installment they are in on that current loan, the reward is equally divided to the remaining installments, and then it reduces the installment amount going forward. There's also the option for the school owner to decide that, okay, use whatever amount I've been able to acquire to clear the next installment. If you can clear everything, or even the next two installments, depending on how much they got. So these are the two options that we give to the schools. And I also mentioned each loan has a chance of one reward. So once the reward is administered on that particular loan, it doesn't qualify for a reward again until the school takes their next loan. The school take their next IfL loan. That is, if they want to continue taking IfL loans. Next slide. Okay, so this is where I hand it over back to Ponima to take us to the breakout room.
Thanks so much, Ralph. There are some good questions that are coming up in the chat. What I would recommend is, because we've lost a bunch of time in the beginning, we will skip through the breakout activity and go right to the next section where we are going to be talking through some of the implementation realities. Sammy is going to be taking us through that section. And then, because we also have Rob on the call from Jackfruit Finance, who has been a lead implementing partner, I would love to invite him to share from his perspective how things have been going on the ground and what some hiccups and challenges are that Jackfruit has been navigating as we've gone through this journey together. So let's hand it to Sammy first, and then we will invite Rob to share.
All right, thanks, Ponima. Yeah, and thanks again, everyone, for staying with us and for your patience as we figured out our technical issues. Now, for the next few minutes, I want to share about what it's actually taken to get IfL off the ground in year one. I've grouped this into four pillars. How we onboarded the financial institutions, how we've earned buy-in from school owners, how we build an assessment we can trust, and where we are on commercial viability. So for each, I'll try to give some of the biggest challenges we hit and what we did about them. But one thing to keep in mind, though, is that this is genuinely a fairly new product for everyone. The schools, the FIs, which short for financial institutions, and especially their field teams. And we worked, through most of it together. So first, the financial institutions. A reward-linked loan basically touches every level of the FI, and it's as I mentioned, fairly new for them too. So a lot of year one was about building that capacity together. Three things stood out. The first is the institutional buy-in. Sponsorship at the top, gets, IfL basically approved, sorry. But it can quietly slip through the priority list, especially at the branch and field levels, unless leadership keeps, signaling that it still matters. So we secured sponsorship right at the top. The CEO and senior management at both the FIs, and in practice, it will often take, regular leadership hurdles during each marketing push to really keep it in front of mind. In year two, we are exploring, basically locking in that by trying to tie branch and field targets to IfL. So it's just not riding on goodwill, especially at these branch and field levels. Second is the frontline, the loan officers. They do carry the biggest or sort of hardest part of the sell, and their IfL targets aren't right now contractually yet, so the easy thing we've seen is for them, often they will just fall back to selling the standard products. Our response was to build capacity right beside them. A Nairobi-based comms firm basically helped us get the right pitch. Then we ran role plays and joint field visits where GSF and IDP and even the FIs go out together to model the conversation with the school owners. But we are still empowering branch managers to, look after their own IfL schools, all backed by scripts and short videos they can share over WhatsApp amongst, each other and even the school owners. And that is the back end. A tiered, sort of like reward-linked loan does not necessarily fit, a standard loan book. Left alone, it turns into a lot of manual workarounds that would break the moment you try to, scale them. So we re-engineered the whole journey end to end, choosing schools, the handoff from officer to branch to HQ, onboarding and parental consent, working out the reward and even paying it, and even getting the results back to schools. The one thing I'd flag is that we build a dedicated IfL field right inside their core loan software. So eligibility and also pricing, the tracking side of it at least is automated instead of being led by hand. Next slide, please. The second one is the school owners, and none of this works. Sorry about that. None of this works without their genuine buy-in. Our first learning is that demand isn't created by this sleeker pitch. It comes from designing the product around what owners actually told us they need. So before scaling, we ran focus groups and persona audits in Nairobi to just understand what motivates them and what worries them. We then use that to shape our communication so we could close the gap between how a loan officer pitches and how an owner actually hears it. The second is being responsive on the terms. And I want to be precise here because this comes up a lot. The 1% commitment fee is a deliberate choice by design. It's there so the school has sort of like a skin in the game and is genuinely committed to prioritize learning. Without it, every school says yes because there is really nothing to lose. So the fee itself isn't I would say, up for negotiation. Where we've been responsive, though, is in how it's paid. Jackfruit, for example, now lets schools spread the 1% over time or pay it at reward administration time rather than pay it all up front. And at PC, schools can now choose between, two reward payout options to feed their own cash flows against their own loan obligations. That, and I think this is why it's exciting, is moving toward demand-led adoption. So chasing school owners one by one does not scale. The strongest pull is peer proof. Schools, hearing it basically from other schools. And at Jackfruit, actually, for example, we've started filming testimonial videos from proprietors rewarded after midline assessments in February and sharing them over WhatsApp with the full prospect list. We've also run activation events where a few current recipients offer testimonials live to interested directors. And the most recent one was actually really encouraging. We've received interest from more schools, and the team is following up now with several expected to sign on very soon. Next slide, please. The third is assessment. The whole model rests on a reward, and that reward is only as trusted as the measurement behind it. It has to be credible and contextual. A score schools believe in. So the composite score weights three things equally: a third reading, a third math, and a third on how accurately teachers predicted their own pupils' performance. That last part is a neat way of rewarding schools that genuinely know where their children are. Reading and math use, as mentioned earlier, EGRA and EGMA tools. And we benchmarked them through 2025 study of more than 90 low-cost Kenyan schools, aligned them to also national curriculum and shared them with KICD. Then there is the safeguards. The moment you put money on a score, you start creating a temptation to game it, basically, right? Or even quietly sideline weaker pupils. So integrity is basically built in. The questions are withheld, kept off the national exam syllabus, and even refreshed each round. Pupils are, picked at random from the register, and even mop-up visits for anyone absent are done. And the teacher prediction weighting actively reduces bias against weaker and even special needs learners. And it has to stay trustworthy at scale without stressing young children. So ID Insight, will continue running it independently under the IRB approved ethics. The tools are tablet-based and gamified, take about an hour and run twice a year. At Midline, we assessed over 1,100 pupils across 68 schools, sorry. And the ID signal from that midline is encouraging, but again, still just an early read. The end line measured against our control schools is what will start tying some of the behavioral shifts to the reward. And of course, with some expected to mature in year 2 and onwards. Next slide, please. The last is commercial viability. And I think it's naturally one of the biggest questions, or around whether this can stand on its own. And honestly, it's early, and we are watching uptake really closely, but the design and the first signals are pointing in the right way. It's built to be self-funding. For these to outlast grant money, the reward can't stay as a subsidy. So it's structured against the interest income the FIs earn on the portfolio. As the loan book basically grows, the income is what will carry that reward. Year one's reward capital was philanthropic by design, and the absorption modeling will start kicking in as the portfolio matures. Aligned incentives across the whole chain is the heart of why it can work. A multi-stakeholder sort of partnership only holds when everyone gains something that keeps them in. The FIs expand their core lending business, schools gain data, rewards, and even reputation. Children get stronger foundational learning, and investors get measurable impact per dollar. In the first cycle, we have disbursed 65 loans and around 130,000 US dollars, with 100% of schools qualifying for a reward. And we're already seeing follow-on loans from March this year, which is exactly the organic repeat demand we are hoping for. And the portfolio is still young. So treat year two as a fast cut, not as a final verdict. But I would say the trajectory is definitely encouraging. So the honest picture is that the IfL idea is really sound. The hard work has been mostly operational, and sustainability is also something we are engineering deliberately, not just assuming. Yeah, and since I've actually been talking about our financial institutions, financial institution partner, I'd love to bring Rob in. Rob is the founder and CEO of Jackfruit Finance, one of the two FIs delivering IfL on the ground. Rob, if you can come in and share any reflections or anything you'd like to add or build on from the partner seat for a minute or two, we'll greatly appreciate. Rob, are you there? I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. I didn't have the permission. Sure, Sammy, I mean, I'm happy to share that you guys have covered it off in a lot of detail. So just to give 10 seconds on who we are for everyone's reference, like we're called Jackfruit Finance. We now work in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, and we use technology to lend to schools. We've lent to 940 schools. And the vision of the organization was to bring affordable, transparent, and accessible financing to education. IfL has always been like central to what we envisage this becoming, because ultimately, like, it is incredibly difficult as purely as a financing partner to influence change in the schools, and the overarching mission of the organization is to improve educational outcomes. So we were 100% on board with this from day one, but irrespective of that, it's still been incredibly difficult to actually operationalize. So the organization's now just under 100 people. And to create the buy-in at every single level, which is ultimately what you have to do to scale this across the organization, has been difficult. And we have probably been the lower of the two partners from a performance standpoint, for sort of a couple of really key reasons. So Sammy and Ralph and Ponima touched on the 1% upfront fee. Schools' willingness to be on the hook for that amount is actually very positive now that they've started to see some of their peers getting rewards, but their ability to actually transfer 1% outside of a specific loan coming in has been really difficult. So we had to adjust strategy there. And then obviously there's a huge component here around building trust and confidence in the school directors that this is actually something that's going to come through. But I think we've been starting to push that well. And then I'll touch on one other piece that I think is relevant here is, so we had always envisaged, so we have two organizations basically. We have Jackfruit Finance, that is the for-profit lending arm that raises for-profit capital to on-lend to schools. And then we have Jackfruit Foundation, that is a fully 501c3 with a Kenya subsidiary, so NGO, like pure and simple. And we always envisaged that the two would be symbiotic, and the way it would connect was through a program like IfL. So this program has been run within our organization out of the foundation, but by using the Jackfruit Finance field team and operational team, etc., to actually scale it and disperse it. And there's definitely been some challenges there when you're looking to align incentives and targets and balance. I mean, we're a relatively young organization. We're about to be 5 years old. So there's always a lot of conflicting tensions within an organization like ours. And then we also have a for-profit board who are obviously constantly questioning me why I'm using some of the capacity of the for-profit side for something that they deem to be more on the philanthropy side. The reason that I've pushed back heavily on that, and I know this aligns with what GSF and IDP kind of envisage this becoming as well, is that this to me is how we can intrinsically bake impact into lending. Because I was responding to someone on one of the chats just around costs. We charge 28% per annum. We are more than the banks. The reason the schools go with us is we're often 3 times cheaper than our competitors, which to me is still not good enough. So like I envisage a world where we are able to unlock much more concessional debt financing that enables us to lend to schools at less, still do it as a for-profit instrument where schools are paying interest, but comparable to banks. And then where we're able to also leverage the kind of the impact that's created around that to bring in more programs on the foundation side and everything kind of interlinked. So to me, the central piece that can link this all together is the IfL program and the impact that we can create through our lending products there. But I could probably talk for 2 hours if you wanted me to go to granular on all this stuff. So I'm sort of happy to pause there, Sammy, Bonnie, Ralph, unless there's something else you guys would like me to touch on.
No, thank you so much, Rob. That partner perspective is exactly what makes this real. And yeah, with that, I'd hand it back over to Ponima to take us into the next section.
Thanks so much. All right, so I think I'm not going to take too much of everybody's time. I want to leave the last 10 minutes to just talk through any questions that you have and you've been posting on the chat. But just quickly, one of the key elements of this program that we are thinking about through the pilot is how do we make it sustainable beyond grant funding, which is to say that for now, the rewards are being covered by IDP Foundation. So any kind of shortfall on the interest that the financial institutions are not receiving because of the reward amount is being bridged by the IDP Foundation. But in the long run, I think what we want to make sure is that we are building at least a level of self-sustainability where the reliance on grant funding is as limited as it can be. Just moving forward on the slide. So the idea is that as the loan book grows, so we are also seeing IfL as a lever for financial institutions to attract more clients, retain more clients, and for schools who are participating in this program to improve their learning and signal to the market that they are a differentiated school who's focusing on learning outcomes and not just school and infrastructure expansion. And the idea is that as the learning, as they are able to signal this to the market and as the learning grows, they are also going to be attracting newer enrollments, and that will lead to a need for larger follow-on loans from the school's end, which brings back business to the financial institutions as well, and their interest income on this segment will grow. And as we move forward, the higher interest income on their larger loan book, along with the 1% client contribution fee, will be able to absorb the reward cost over a period of time in the next few years, not immediately, but definitely somewhere around year 5 is where we are hoping that the larger loan books and the 1% client contribution is able to absorb the reward cost, and there is limited reliance on grant capital, so as to say. I just want to quickly recap what the program wins have been so far. So somebody was asking in the chat how many schools we've been able to tap into yet. In the first year of implementation, we marketed the IfL loan to about 150 schools. There were 77 schools, so more than 50% who opted in to take the IfL loan, and they paid the 1% client contribution. Along the way, there were some dropouts. So at the end of the first year, we basically disbursed 65 IfL loans and assessed these schools and disbursed capital of about $130,000 from both the financial institutions, so from both Jackfruit as well as Premier Credit. And to our surprise, all of these 65 schools qualified for some level of the reward. So they were split between the 4 tiers that Ralph was showcasing previously. A bunch of schools were actually in the first category, so tier one, which was the bronze tier, and they qualified for about 35% rebate on their or reduction in their interest amount. And some of them even qualified for higher tiers, but every school who participated was actually eligible for a reward. The next year, the second year of implementation, we are going to be focusing a lot on solidifying the evidence around sustainable learning gains in the schools that participate. We are also going to be working in a very focused manner to improve the operational efficiency around the loan disbursement process as well as the assessment process. And the key central point that all of us are focusing on is how do we make this commercially sustainable in the long run. That's about it. I think in terms of the timeline, we've spoken about this previously. We started out in 2023 with conceptualizing this model through workshops with our design partners. 2025, 2026 is the pilot period. 2027 is where we are going to be building a second academic year of evidence. And from 2028 onwards, we are identifying opportunities for replication across geographies, across school types, and even across sectors when it comes to moving beyond just education focus to WASH outcomes, etc. And I'm going to pause there and actually invite anybody who has questions to raise their hands, or if you're able to unmute yourself, just come forward and ask or share your reflections based on what we've shared today. I'm not entirely sure if people can unmute themselves, but if you're able to raise your hand, I'm happy to unmute.
Yes. Sorry,
Maya,
yeah.
are you speaking? Because you're on mute. Should we?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry, I was talking. I thought I'd managed to unmute myself. I was saying thanks so much. Really interesting presentation. I'm Maya from Save the Children Global Ventures, so partner in the program. I was just curious about the 1% client contribution, kind of the additional interest that is being paid. Because I think, Rob, you mentioned that was difficult to implement, but I wasn't sure if it's still being implemented and if the rationale for that is for the sustainability of the program or just to ensure that the schools have bought into it, so there's commitment from their side, or probably a bit of both. But just wondered if you could talk a bit more to that.
Yeah, I mean, the reason it has been difficult is also just like one of those like programmatic design complexities, I think, as well. So there's a number, because we created a treatment group of schools, and then some of those schools are not actually receiving new loans, they're receiving top-ups, or they're choosing to switch to the IfL program. The cash flows of many of the schools we work in, I mean, most of the schools we lend to are below 100 US dollars a school term. So their cash flows are very low. So even contributing $10, $20, which is often what this equates to, is actually quite difficult for them, especially at the time of year we're at right now, because it's the end of the second school term. So they're like particularly cash strapped in that sense. Does that answer your question? I mean, it's kind of more around that, honestly. I know that the original design theory behind it was to ensure that the school bought in, understood it, cared about it, and wasn't just like, cool, another free thing, let's go for it. So to sort of spur more deep thought. Does that answer your question?
Anyone else who had a question? Maybe you can put your name in the chat or just drop us a line in the chat and we can unmute. We are not having the best day with tech today. Apologies about that. There are a lot of questions in the chat around sustainability beyond the pilot period, especially who will cover costs for data collection, field costs, and all of those things. I think that's a part of the thinking, and that's something that we're trialing different ways around through the pilot period. So one of the intention in the second academic year that we are going to be implementing is to experiment with some low-cost assessment tools and see how existing operators on the ground can actually cover the costs for it or embed this within their own operations. So it's not something that we have an answer to now, but it's definitely a question on our mind because we definitely agree that the philanthropy and the grant funding will need to wean off after a particular point of time to make this completely commercially viable. Felix, I'm happy to unmute you.
Thanks. You mentioned that one of the intents of the program is to incentivize school owners to prioritize school learning outcomes. Is that something you found in your initial research, that they were not doing this? They didn't see the value of improving the quality of provision in the schools?
It's a really good question. Ralph, do you want to speak from your experience in Ghana? Rob, did you want to come in as well? Go for it.
I'm definitely happy to go after Ralph because we've been basically duplicating his IDP's work in Ghana.
Okay, thank you. So, Felix, that is not the case. What we've often seen is, and this is basically through financial services or financing schools. Normally, or usually, they prioritize the loan to improve physical infrastructure. Hardly or well, few times you find a school taking a loan to improve or directly actually work on learning improvement. So it more goes towards physical growth and improvement. Not like they don't see, improving quality as important, but they would rather kind of use their own generated income to actually address that. But when it comes to taking a loan, that is not the focus area. But this is the program. We want to actually embed that into their thinking when it comes to apportioning resources, whether it's through a loan or their own internally generated income. So we want to put this as one of the things to consider when thinking about, okay, I have this money, what should I use it for in the school? And that is what we want. So we want to move learning up I would say the to-do list or the priority list for a school, and not have it be the fourth, the fifth, or the sixth thing on their priority list. Rob, you can come in.
Yeah. I just think also, I think when we go into schools, the way that they focus and prioritize and educational outcomes, learning outcomes, all these different things varies enormously. Like every single school is completely different. From our standpoint, the mindset is kind of more around, I suppose, celebrating those schools, rewarding those schools, lining up the incentives between like Jackfruit Finance, because ultimately, like we often get grant funding to do programs or create change in schools, and it's way more effective for us to be aligned with like our partner schools on the ground. Like if we create the change, we get more grants or we get cheaper capital, and we really want to be tying that across and passing that benefit across. And then there's another piece as well that we've been working on with a team out of Yale, which kind of sits separately to this, but this is all kind of about visibility on the ground. We also want to be enabling schools to showcase the educational quality and improvement to the parents. So to help grow the best performing schools, to bring more students to the right schools. And when you go on the ground and you go into these schools and you ask, like, how would a parent understand the quality of the school? It's often very, very challenging. So that's kind of the vision of, like, certainly our vision is to help create visibility at the parent level as well. And the top performing schools will then have something to talk about, using the IfL program, using all of the achievements that they've made on this side as well. So that's kind of the other thinking around this piece as well.
Thanks. Is there not a risk associated with incentivizing schools to focus on performance if there are child protection issues? I mean, if you're getting them to invest in quality provision, when, for example, the buildings are falling down, it's an extreme example, but if they're falling down, but you're saying, listen, if you want money off the loan, we need to see some quality improvements. Is that not introducing a risk around the safety of the children in the schools?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's risk. And when it comes to education, there's risks in every single direction. One of the key pieces here is we rely heavily on our field team who are on the ground going in and out of schools. We've often financed improvements to facilities already, or improved school buses, or all these sorts of things. So we've also been quite careful around which schools we select to be put forward towards the IfL program. And ultimately, when it comes to, like, child protection and all these pieces as well, there's a huge amount of training within our organization. And then if you think about adding on GSF and IDP, who have been seeing a lot of this as well on the ground, it's a lot of eyes. But yeah, I mean, there's always risks. I'm sure Ralph has a thought on this as well.
Yeah, so Felix, the whole point is not to have them use the loan to, not to develop physical infrastructure and then use it directly for learning. The whole point is, yes, you can even use the loan to improve your physical infrastructure, but also think about improving learning. So there is no restriction on what they should use the loan for. If they see that this is the need to use the loan for, they are allowed to use it for whatever they want to use it for the school. Actually, we see this as a two improvement angle where, yes, they use the loan to improve the physical infrastructure, but they are also investing whichever way. It could be strong supervision. It could be putting teachers to the task, making teachers more accountable. It could be engaging parents to always have kids attending rather than staying home. So these are kind of low to no cost kind of strategy schools can adopt whilst using the loan to improve the physical infrastructure.
Okay, but you are creating an incentive to prioritize quality provision potentially over infrastructure, which does introduce a risk. Sorry, this is this is probably a discussion that will go on. So
Yeah,
I'm happy
I will
take it
interject just by wrapping this up and saying that there are some minimum guardrails that we've put in place for selecting the schools, and basic infrastructure is one of them. The due diligence of that is done by loan officers in the field. The second thing to say is child safeguarding policy is actually embedded into loan appraisal terms for both the FI, so both Jackfruit Finance as well as Premier Credit have a child safeguarding policy in place because they work with schools, and that's something that they use for the loan appraisal process. So the basic infrastructure checks and the guardrails are very much kind of filtered out using both of those criteria. In terms of improvements, we are not telling the school what do they need to kind of invest into, as long as it's leading to some improvement in learning outcomes. At the moment, our framework is steered towards learning outcome improvement, but maybe in the future we look at it more holistically in terms of child development and safety and gender and other outcomes as well. But for now, it's steered towards learning outcomes. I will wrap us up by saying that there are a lot of questions and interest pouring in from the participants in understanding how the learning data has shifted across the assessment cycle. So I just wanted to flag and say that our endline is planned for September this year, and we are going to be sharing results in terms of what kind of interventions have schools adopted and what does the growth data look like in IfL schools in our next session on IfL in November this year. But before that, there are going to be some other sessions on innovative financing models like outcome funds and smart subsidies, which you're going to be hearing from us and the team around. And just before we let you go, we've launched a poll to get your feedback on how useful did you find this session. So please do feel free to leave in your comments before you start exiting the meeting. And thank you all so much for joining us today. And apologies again for the technical glitch in the beginning, but this has been very interesting for us to share as a fruit of our labor over the last many, many years.